right, so we had a good discussion led by Dr. Carruthers here about more the farm scale topic of economics and marketing, and now we're expanding our perspective and talking bigger picture with adoption trends being what they are. And we have a great set of panelists here that are going to introduce themselves in a second. I'll give us a little bit more context first. So here, some of our goals are to discuss knowledge for industry trends related to wholesale market access, strategies and barriers, emphasizing farm gate value, possibly cooperative structures, lessons learned in generating and maintaining buyers and value chain partners. We have three folks from the chestnut community here, and we're very happy to have Bailey here from the American Pecan Promotion Board. And I didn't accidentally call it the marketing board, so we're off to a good start. So we'll go down the row here. Brad, if you want to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Ron. Hello, everyone. My name is Brett Hundley. I am the president of Agroforestry Partners. We're an investment fund that works to expand agroforestry around the United States. I've spent most of my 22-year career in the investment world, working mainly on food and agribusiness sectors. At Agroforestry Partners, we manage about 1,600 acres of chestnut agroforestry in Kentucky right now, and we're continuing to fundraise so that we can convert more farmland over to agroforestry going forward. I think that's about it, all I'll share at this point. I'll pass it on to you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Roger Blackwell, and I've been involved with chestnuts over 38 years. I'm a student of chestnuts, actually. I'm still learning, and there's several people in this room that I still learn a lot about chestnuts. I'm in Michigan. We have a co-op there of 35 growers, and this last season we did over 200,000 pounds that we brought to the market. Basically, about 75% of our chestnuts go into the wholesale market. So we'll talk a little bit about that later. And I have my own orchard. It's called New Era Chestnuts, and it's over in Montague, Michigan, and it's prospered well. And I share that with my brother-in-law. Unfortunately, he passed away December the 1st, but it wasn't for him. And I got to tell you, MSU, I know there's University of Missouri is big on chestnuts, but I'll tell you, Michigan State University has also been a great mentor in me being in the chestnut business. So I'm really excited about that. And I guess we'll talk some more in a minute.
I'm Bill Stouffer, Cedar Hill Farms, LLC. We got into the chestnut business about 15 years ago. We had a farm that's been in the family since the New Madrid earthquake, 1812, and I wanted something that I could find that would support the farm. The kids could either manage it or they could hire management, and chestnuts seemed like the thing to go with. We also do some alley cropping. We grow wheat between the trees. Wheat does a number of things for us that I think makes chestnut growing easier. Number one, it uses the moisture in the spring when the chestnuts don't need it. Then when we cut the grain, we get a nice mulch of straw that helps conserve moisture and keep the weeds down. And then when we're trying to pick up chestnuts, we've got a nice straw base that keeps the nuts clean. And clean chestnuts are a lot easier to deal with than dirty chestnuts. But we've been wheat after wheat for 16 years now, and it's worked very well for us. They don't compete with each other, and they again, makes growing the chestnuts a lot easier, being able to get clean wheat. We sell everything online for the most part, 95% through our website. I'm always amazed at the demand for fresh chestnuts. When I was a corn and bean farmer before this. And I could just go to the elevator and dump. And I was a little real concerned about whether we were going to be able to move chestnuts or not. But I have turned away from the fear of not being able to sell chestnuts to fearful of selling too many. There's a lot of demand for good fresh chestnuts.
I'm Bailey Segars. I work for the American Pecan Promotion Board and the American Pecan Council, and I serve as the Senior Manager of Industry Relations. I'm fresh into my career, but I'm not new to the pecan industry. I got my master's degree up under Dr. Lenny Wells, who is on the first panel today, in pecan horticulture, studying hedge pruning and the effects on sustainability in the southeastern United States. And then previous to that, I also got my bachelor's degree at the University of Georgia, and I did an internship with John B. Sanfilippo and Sons, which is a nut company based out of Chicago, and they have different plants in Texas, Georgia, Chicago, or Illinois, and California. So my passion for the nut industry's probably been for about 4 years strong since I did my internship. And personally, I have a fresh cut flower operation, and I've been deeply rooted in production agriculture from a young age.
Thanks, everybody. Bailey, we're going to start with you for the first question. Could you tell us a little bit more about the stability or growth status of U.S. pecans today? And if you could add some color to how and where the American Pecan Promotion Board is working to create new markets?
Yeah, the pecan industry is unique, just like most other tree nut crops. And the stability of the pecan industry, I would say, has always been, fairly stable. We have the growing region spans all the way across the United States, and APPV and APC serve all those growing states. There's about 15 of them. And I think that helps when, Georgia has a hurricane come through, that there's a crop in New Mexico that kind of makes sure that the pecan supply is there. And then when Georgia has a down year, New Mexico can pick up the supply in Texas and Oklahoma. And those, the top 5 growing states are spread out. And so, production is not just in one specific area when those types of events happen. And APPB does a lot of work domestically. So APC is our international marketing arm, and then APPB is our domestic marketing arm. And then APPB focuses on marketing in Mexico. And through that marketing, we're able to serve growers and make sure that they have a place to go with their pecans is APPB's focus. And we work for growers. That's our tagline. So we want to make sure that when you produce a crop, that you have somewhere to go with that crop. And you'll see all the different campaigns that we've had. Some people have the hats off the table that say, I'm a snack, surprisingly snackable pecans. We want people to know that pecans are not just for the holiday season. We want them to adopt them as a snacking food and as an everyday use. And a lot of that comes around just educating consumers. That's been a conversation throughout the room today. What are chestnuts? And I'll be honest, I didn't know really what chestnuts were, what they were used for until coming out here. And that's what we've had to work hard for in the pecan industry. Everybody knows what an almond is. So we want everybody to know what a pecan is. And so that's what we've really focused on.
Thanks, Bailey. We're going to go over to Brett here. We're going to switch tracks to chestnut for that reason. So U.S. chestnuts are at a very different stage in development compared to pecans, but growing quickly. Can you offer some perspective on where the supply and markets are and what's on the horizon, but not too much information? So we'll get to some more details later. And as someone responsible for a large supply of chestnuts, coming in the pipeline in 5+ years, how are you starting to think about market access?
Sure. So according to our research, we think that current U.S. chestnut production is around 10 million pounds annually. And then according to USDA data, net imports into the U.S. are around 6.5 million pounds annually. So total supply on the US market right now, we see around 17 million pounds annually. And the market seems to be in good equilibrium, just according to price data from Chestnut Growers of America in recent years. So market's in good equilibrium, 17 million pounds annually. But to be sure, there's a lot of new production coming online in the years ahead. You showed a chart earlier. We basically think that acreage in the US has doubled, maybe even more since 2020. A lot of this is non-bearing, right? So there's going to be a lot of production coming online into 2030 and beyond. And we also think a lot of these newer plantings are more concentrated relative to legacy production. So you're going to have a lot more chestnut product coming off each acre going forward. So altogether, into 2030 and beyond, we see the potential for another 15 to 20 million pounds of production to be added to the US market on top of the 10 million pounds that are already in production. So a lot of production coming. The good news is that, a significant portion of that 15 to 20 can offset that 6.5 million pounds that comes in as low quality imports today. But no doubt we're going to have to do a really hard job of developing the US market further. As far as market access goes, I saw that you flashed that pistachio graphic earlier, and we're trying to learn from other tree nut industries. We've been talking to the pistachio folks. They told us there's basically three things that are critical. Number one, you have to develop an export market as a base load of demand. It's just absolutely critical. Number two is we have to expand consumer awareness, and we have to drive retail grocery interest for fresh product. And then number three is we need to develop value-added chestnut products. And so at Agroforestry Partners, those are three things that we're keyed in on in real time right now.
Thanks, Brett. We're doing good with the microphone too. So that's also a good start. Bailey, we're going to go back to you for a little more pecan expertise. And so if we're thinking about the pecan history or, history of the industry and how it's come to be, were there particular periods of more rapid growth in U.S. pecans? And if so, how did the industry adapt? Are there any lessons that might be transferable here? And if there is a story there, did grower coordination play a role in any way?
So yeah, there's a couple, and Lenny touched on some earlier, Georgia specific, when booms happened in the 1960s and 1980s. Pecan expanded westward more so from the East Coast, and then in 2010 in Georgia and on the East Coast, we saw a lot of new plantings come in and more high density plantings come in response to the China years, is what we refer to them as in the pecan industry, and it's when we had a really big market. Export market in China, and Georgia is the first to harvest every year from east all the way to west coast. Georgia starts production in about mid-September typically with the earlier varieties, and they go all the way through November, December. They should be finished up in Georgia, and then New Mexico and the further western states are just now finishing up. So when we had those China years, obviously the market was really, really good. Prices were really, really high. And a lot of people jumped on board and started planting trees. Well, then we lost that China market when the South African pecans came into play. And so the South African market beats Georgia to the production realm every year. And so we lost that market. And then we I won't say that we saw we did see, people stopped planting, but then we had to work to rebuild export markets. And so since 2021, we've worked to rebuild export markets in the UK. We're still in China, we're in Germany, we're in the Netherlands, and we're trying to get into Japan and United Arab Emirates. And that slide you showed earlier just shows the hub and spokes of where we're at and where we're trying to get to. And I think export markets, and we won't be able to, fully be able to make a claim on this once it's presented to our board in February. We've done a price driver analysis study. So in the past few years, I'm not going to get up here and tell you that pecan prices were great, because if you look them up, you're gonna call me a liar. And Lenny we're fully transparent about that. But prices were better this year. And that study that we invested in APC invested in, is going to kind of allude to what drives those prices. And we're seeing some early reports from that study show that export markets have positively impacted the price of pecans. So I think it's very important to continue to build those export markets, as well as continue to build domestic demand to keep prices more stable and not fluctuate as much.
Are those markets based on in-shell nuts or cracked, kernels, or some other kind of value-added product, or a multitude of those things?
They're mainly in-shell and kernels is pretty much the market there. There is a little bit of value added once it gets to those destinations, like in the UK. Whitworth's is a big candy making company in the UK, and they, started using pecans in their different recipes and things, but it's predominantly in shell and kernel. The problem we run into in pecans with shipping kernels and exporting kernels is, shelf life and stability. It's not as bad as chestnuts from what I'm hearing. But you have to think we're trying to get into India right now in the in-shell market. And that shows a lot of promise compared to a kernel when it's sitting on a boat for 3 months. Already shelled. Them staying in shell helps preserve the quality of that pecan. And so whatever we can do to make sure that the quality is there when it gets to those export countries is really important to us.
We have 10,000 acres of pecans in the States, and many really well suited floodplains or bottomlands. Is the APC/ABB recommending acreage expansion in the U.S., and is that concentrated in certain states, or is it more broad?
Of course we want people to grow pecans, and we want the pecan industry to grow and be successful. But yeah, I think it's really important. Just the horticulture side of me is to know your land, to know your inputs and the commitment that you're making to a pecan tree. When you plant a pecan tree, you're not going to see your first bear of crop usually until 7 or 8 years, and the crop is not going to be huge then. And so I think it goes back to what's been echoed throughout the day is know your commitment when you're getting into it. But of course, we want to support you. And, it's wild to me that the state has 10,000 acres, and it's kind of the nut that's on the quieter end in this room right now, compared to chestnuts, which is, it's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing. But I think it's just one of those opportunities that this state has to continue to grow and reach out to us for support. And, I had the opportunity to meet some of the Missouri guys at our APB Research Symposium, and they were really intrigued by the different work that was being done in the pecan industry. And I think it helped ignite them to come back and bring that back to the state of Missouri to see how they can better service those growers. And I know the majority of the crop in Missouri is native, and I think native pecans tell a unique story. Oklahoma has a lot of native crop, but unfortunately that native crop gets left on the ground when prices aren't great because it costs too much to harvest them. And they're harder to process and shell and things like that. But I think when you taste a native pecan, your mind would change, because I tasted one for the first time this year, and the oil content in those things are incredible. And the flavor brings out a lot. And I think that this state in Oklahoma has a really good opportunity to capitalize and tell that story of America's native tree nut, and that's a pecan.
Has APP thought about how to complement that as like a niche as part of its marketing, or is that sort of too small volume?
I don't think it's a too small volume. We would just have to have the industry support to do that. And we would be glad to, help the industry market that if that's something that they would be willing to do, start harvesting native crop consecutively and, really buy into that. But it's definitely, there's native trees all throughout the United States. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, when there's a lot on the ground in Missouri and Oklahoma that don't get picked up, there's no market for them to go to.
Thanks, Bailey. So we're going to bring it back to chestnuts. And sorry, Roger and Bill, I'm quiet for you, but here's a question, and we got plenty of time. So I want to bring the question we gave to Brett to you both as well, and sort of reseed you with it. So where are you seeing opportunity for wholesale market growth? Can you share a bit more on demand pull, price point, stability? And are there any particular selling points that you're finding that drive access to that kind of market?
Okay, right now, in Michigan, and I'm the lead, have been the lead sales guy for the co-op, and we sell to in the wholesale area. Our biggest buyer is out of the Detroit produce terminal, and we've developed this over time. But let me go back in the beginning when we first started out, like the co-op is 24 years old at this point in time. And back in the beginning, I actually walked into buyers, and one of the buyers was down in the Detroit produce terminal. And I brought a couple of 25-pound bags of fresh chestnuts, and I offered them to the buyer. And one thing in the marketplace that I learned is, initially I didn't understand this, but I'd open up a bag, and the produce buyer would want to taste the raw chestnut. Well, I'd be the first one. I'd take my chestnut out of the bag, bite into it. People think, when you see it, some people think the nut is really hard. It's not. It's like a potato, really, in a raw state. And then the buyer would bite into it, and 9 times out of 10, they loved it. And then we started the sales talk as far as, well, if I sell you chestnuts, we would like you to buy just enough for maybe the next 2 to 3 weeks. I want to sell them just in time. We pack them up when we get the order. We pack them up the day before, and take them out of the refrigeration area at 33 degrees, pack them up, load them up on pallets. Right now we're doing 1,600 pounds on a pallet, and we'd ship them out to the buyer. I did that to several buyers in the Detroit metropolitan area, and we've been a success ever since. Another buyer that we have is Meijer store. Some of you may be familiar with. They're in like 4 states, and we do custom 1-pound bagging for them. And we sell 16 1-pound bags that are specially perforated 1-pound bags that have a Ziploc on them. And the Meijer stores, we figure out how many cases they want for each distribution center, which they have 4 distribution centers, and we ship them out on pallets. And we do one group of shipments just before Thanksgiving, and then we do another shipment about the middle of December. And we've been able to get a premium price on those. They're usually medium-sized chestnuts in the market. We've learned well, and the chestnuts will appear in each one of the grocery stores. We've definitely emphasized refrigeration. They put them between the carrots and the cranberries in the refrigeration area. And another market that I worked on for a long time was Whole Foods, and that's just continued to grow over time. And then I'm going to tell you a real quick story. There's one store, well, it's 2 stores, 2 grocery stores. Basically, it's a European clientele in these 2 grocery stores. And between November 1st and basically through Christmas, they buy 20,000 pounds of chestnuts, and they buy 100 bags, 2,500 pounds every week. We ship them to them, and they spread them out between the 2 stores. And that's just one dynamic market that we have. But I'm going to preface this, and I want to share this with you. Basically, we're doing a lot of ethnic markets. Seems like we're selling the fresh too. And I want to give you the statistic, and Brett probably already knows this, but in the U.S. population, there's a statistic that the American public eat a measly 0.05 kilogram per person, as to in Europe, 1 to 2 kilograms per person, and in Asia, 3 to 5 kilograms per person. So what I want to tell you is, and I've done many roastings, and one of them was at the Eastern Market for several years. And we'd go to Eastern Market, and every other customer would say, have you ever had a roasted chestnut? And 9 times out of 10, they said no. So we said, well, here's a sample. Doesn't cost you any money. What do you think? And most of the time, the person said, wow, I never thought a chestnut tasted like this. And it wasn't like a nut. I call it kind of the unnut. It was roasting it. It's soft, somewhat like a sweet potato because it's sweet. And that's how you get customers. And I'm going to tell you, all that are chestnut growers here, we need to teach the American public that they need chestnuts. They don't know that they need chestnuts yet. We need to teach them because, and I know Bill will tell you too, it's right now, it's easy. We have a very good demand. We get fresh nuts to the public and it's just fantastic. But in a little bit here, we're going to have to do some hard selling like we're talking about with pecans.
Could you speak to that though? I don't know if you quite hit it. I know you hit on it yesterday at the workshop. So your cooperative takes over 200,000 pounds to market now.
Right.
Mostly like 99% of it to retailers wholesale.
Right. Well, 80, I would say 70, well, probably 90% of our chestnuts go into the fresh market in the wholesale. And then about between 5 and 10% we sell on the internet.
If you had a larger crop next year from your growers,
Yes.
What would be the number that you think you could get to market?
Right now I'm planning on, with our growth expectations, approximately, we're going to have at least an additional 50,000 pounds for our co-op to sell. And I'm already talking to some prospect buyers that, hey, can you handle another 20 to 25,000 pounds? Could you handle that? And I have them available. And in fact, I already sent samples to them for the buyer prospects. And I'm anticipating what the market demand will be from our co-op. And right now, I believe that we can handle, with our current size facility that we have at MSU that we rent every year, we can easily handle 400,000 pounds through our processing operation. We can do 4,000 pounds an hour through our mechanized, washing, sizing, taking the float out, like Jeff was talking about earlier. In our process, we can do about 4,000 pounds an hour. So we're set up to be able to handle that. And we'd be pushing it to go to 500,000. We're already anticipating that we need to look for additional refrigeration in the next 3 to 5 years.
Will you need a larger facility at some point?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And do you guys have eyes or a timeline on when you?
Yes, we do. And we're also building our equity fund so that we can either buy land and also build a larger facility. Refrigeration is a big deal. I mean, we have refrigeration at MSU, and that was created by the Apple industry many years ago, and they've upgraded it, and it works very well for us. But we know that our years are numbered before we're going to have to expand and accommodate a larger volume. I envision over the next 20 years, just our co-op could easily be handling up to 1 million pounds.
Do you think with steady, like proactive, like 12 months ahead of time, like sales or market development in that wholesale retail market, you'll be able to sort of get up to that scale of demand?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Yep. And our growers know that. So
did you touch on the price range for that market?
For the wholesale market, our largest chestnuts, which I call them 20s. And that means on average, there's 20 chestnuts in a pound. and I used a scale of like 18 to 22. And just for those of you that are interested in selling chestnuts, I find that having, rather than going jumbo, um, and large and medium and small, we've evolved into this number thing. Before we had like A plus A, we did letter sizes, but now we've evolved to numbers, average chestnuts in a pound for selling purposes. And my buyers like that. They like that number scale. And in talking about this to all of you, specifically and I've talked to Bailey about this, but we need to have a standard, a national standard for chestnuts. We're not there yet, but I view that with the USDA, at some point in time, we need to have some standards for chestnuts.
So I'm going to take it over to Bill here, but after that, Roger, I want to come back and ask your cooperative structure a bit more. But Bill, just to bring us back to the original question, I know most of your sales are internet based at this point, but your orchard's at that inflection point of, a lot of trees between 10 and 15 years old, and your production on your farm is going to go up quite a bit here. What are you seeing as opportunities for the wholesale market growth? And can you comment a bit on what you're seeing as demand pull? Like, is that market there and strong, and what the price points are? Does that, in those kind of contexts, is it still worth it to produce chestnuts?
Yeah, we do mostly online right now, but I have developed a relationship with one ethnic grocery store in St. Louis that I've serviced for the last 16 years or so, because I know at some point in time I'm going to need to move larger volumes. I've also made contact this year, late this year, middle of November, but a gentleman called, he actually lives in Rhode Island, but he's interested in, he services the St. Louis market. He's been buying Italian and California chestnuts. He's interested in buying Missouri grown chestnuts. And so we have developed, or we're in the process of developing a long-term relationship with them. We've sold at 2 different orders, about 1,000 pounds. One was 1,000 pounds, one was 1,500 pounds this year. But moving forward, he's looking at maybe more than 40,000 pounds, somewhere in that nature. And so that market is out there. I leaned towards the online sales. I sold commodities all my life. I'm not interested in the chestnuts becoming a commodity. The relationship you build with folks online is far beyond my expectations. I'm part of the family. It's very interesting. But when you're selling chestnuts, you're also selling memories and relationships. And I decided it doesn't matter what price the chestnuts are, if it's high quality, people are it reminds them of home. I had a 94-year-old gentleman in Chicago that would call me and he'd say, "Well, I don't do this computer stuff." I said, "Well, give me your numbers and I'll put them in for you." He says, "I just love your chestnuts. It reminds me of picking up chestnuts in Italy with my grandpa." I have 2 roommates. They give me the same thing. There's a reminder of home. It's you're selling memories, and I think for individual growers, there's opportunity there to go direct. And one of the advantages we have, number one, growing chestnuts in the United States, you're competing with folks in Italy or China or wherever. We have a tremendous opportunity to sell good chestnuts because many grocery stores set them out in the middle of an aisle and they sit there and they dry up. a nut can fall off of my tree today. 3 days later, 4 days later, I can have it in somebody's refrigerator. And there's just no comparison between what is available in a grocery store. And it's understandable. Number one, they don't have the cooling system that you need to keep them as close to 33, 32 degrees. That slows down respiration. We send a bag along that is perforated so that they can put them in a crisper in the refrigerator, reduce airflow, and keep things fresh. And just the closeness of the market, we have a tremendous advantage over anybody that's trying to import into the United States. And we also have a high population of folks that grew up with chestnuts or their grandparents grew up with chestnuts. And I've just never ceased to be amazed by the demand for good fresh chestnuts. The lady called me from South Carolina and says, your nuts, chestnuts are 400% better than anything I can buy in a store. And I get that all over the United States. We sell in 47 states. Again, our biggest concern is we don't sell too many. I guess another example was 23, I had 400 pounds left. And I put them up the market, put them on the website at 10 o'clock at night. And by 4 o'clock in the morning, they were gone. And I had only one repeat customer. So that customer called friends and they cleaned out the rest of the chestnuts. I think it's I think scary as I know of folks are just starting to get 300 pounds or 500 pounds or 700. I think after this next year, act as a access to the market. I think this one. Okay, is that better? All right. Somebody needs to teach me how to learn about mics. But I don't know where I was going. Somebody, oh yeah, we're going to offer cooling and washing and grading for folks that have nuts and want to get rid of it. But I do think I don't want to be a long time end user. I want to act as a bridge because I think there's a tremendous opportunity for individuals to go direct to the consumer and be well rewarded for it. And it doesn't take, you can develop that. It's surprising how quickly you can develop that with just a little bit of work. And the advantage too is when you start planting chestnuts, there's a ramp, and you need to start thinking about what you're going to sell, and get 2 or 3 years and lay out a map. But you'd be surprised how quickly you'll develop a mailing list, and that's probably the most important thing you can have, is be able to go out and shoot out emails and chestnuts are ready, and then just stand back and hope you don't sell more than you got. what it's been. But I think that there is an advantage for those folks to go direct, and you'll be able to compete with anybody if you have a high quality product. And you have to maintain a very high quality product. There's no question about that.
I think it's great to hear your optimism for the potential growth of your online sales and willingness to be an aggregator. I guess I have two questions there. One, have you had to spend a lot of marketing dollars and consistently to sustain your internet business and its growth? And two, what's your maybe biggest concern in opening up your aggregation, your operation to aggregation?
We advertised in 15 and 16 on Google Ads. And after that point in time, our market grew 30% a year without any advertising. Word of mouth is your best. Well, it's also a vulnerability, but word of mouth is your best opportunity for selling. And to start out with, we had made some contacts through the Chestnut Growers with some folks here in Columbia and Jeff City. And it started out, I had basically three levels. I had online sales. I had these groups happened to be Chinese folks that would go together, and they would order 300 or 400 pounds, and I'd go to the parking lot at Lowe's, and they would come in from everywhere, and the chestnuts would disappear. I get one check, and dealt with one person. And so they had a price level there, and then the ethnic grocery store in St. Louis, and the groups, the Asian groups tended to talk a whole lot more than everybody else, and we wound up with groups in Jefferson City, Columbia, Nashville, and Maine, and got to the point where I was sending 200 pounds to one address, and that became cumbersome, and we've eliminated that group sales. Everybody comes direct now, but it's amazing how those things build and spread. And so start early and get a good reputation. People will find you. Like you said, we sell in 47 states. We got one person in Hawaii that buys nuts, and we got about 10 or 15 in Alaska. And the rest of it can't sell into California, Oregon, or Washington. It's embargoed. And I get well, folks are wanting this. We get nasty letters from California when we refuse their orders, and there's nothing I can do about it. It's illegal. And then the guy in Texas called me and wanted to send them to California. I can't do that. He said, "Well, I'm glad I live in a state where I get your chestnut." It's again, the relationships are extremely important, and I enjoy dealing with the different cultures. Everybody's different. We started out basically before this year. We probably had 90% of our were Asian or Eastern European folks. This year we doubled our production from last year, and my son has a advertising group that he works with for his business, and so we advertised this year. So it's the first time we've spent money on advertising. We've built up another 1,000 people, and the Italians have filled in the hole. So it's no longer Asian based, but it's and again, it's interesting to deal with the different cultures.
Thanks, Bill. So I want to bring it back to you, Roger. I mentioned this question before. So can you speak briefly on your cooperative structure at Chestnut Growers, Inc.?
Sure. Chestnut Growers, Inc., and actually we have a website too, chestnutgrowersinc.com, but we're a marketing co-op, and we have a structure, we have an operating plan where we We have a board of directors. We have, actually, we have 9 people on the board right now. We've been down to 5 at one point, and we're up to 7 for a while. And now we're up to 9 because we're looking at, we have some younger board members, and we're looking at probably 3 or 4 of our board members that will probably are old enough that they may not want to participate on the board anymore. So it's kind of like a learning curve to have a succession plan within the board. Each board member, since we have 9, each board member has a 3-year term. So they get elected, and we have a rotation there. So every year, 3 people come up for election, and then it rotates. So we have a rotating election, and there's occasion, like last year, we had 2 board members that were on, but they got voted out because 2 other people ran and they won. So there was a change in our board. We're incorporated under Michigan law, and and as a marketing co-op. So it's Chestnut Growers, Inc. We usually decide, the board does decide how much we're going to pay each year. And usually we have a target price of at least $3 that we're going to pay back to the growers. But also too, we have a scale, like for those growers that have the 20s and the 26s, get 120% of that $3. And then the medium size, which are the 34s and the 44s, you get 110%. And then the 56 and the 74s, which would be the smallest, they get 100% of that $3 target price. We also pay dividends based on the profit at the end of the year. Our fiscal year starts in September 1st and goes through August 31st. So at each year, there's an additional, we look at our net margin at the end of the fiscal year, and there'll be monies that are distributed to the growers. By the way, as a member, when you join the co-op, you pay $25 to get 1 share of stock. And you pay right now $300 to fill out an application to apply to join the co-op. And that's it. Someday, as we get more competitive, we may raise the application cost, but every shareholder has an equal share of the company. However, the more production you bring in, of course, obviously, the more money you get back. And then also on the annual meeting, you also get additional votes based on your production for that particular year. So that's how you get. So a grower that has a lot of poundage a particular year would be a little bit more powerful than the one guy that just has 1 vote in that. And that's worked very well for our corporation. We do the insurance, we buy used equipment, and then we also have grown equity. So we're looking ahead in the future that for buying property and for buying a facility or build a facility with refrigeration, because that's key. Right now, we've been fortunate that we can rent our facility from MSU, which has refrigeration, and we have all of our equipment in that building. Some of you, if you attended the NNGA CGA meeting in August, got to see that facility. What else?
Thanks, Roger. I think it's really interesting to peek behind the curtain a bit into the cooperative structure. It gives us a lot to chew on.
Sure. I don't know. I didn't answer the price. Like the most expensive, which is our biggest chestnuts, we're selling those wholesale for $132 a bag. So it's $5 and change for 1 pound of chestnuts for the wholesale market. And I had no pushback by our buyers to buy that. And the other thing I might add, in Michigan, in the markets there, what buyers used to buy Italian, they're not the ones that are buying chestnuts from us now. they don't buy Italian anymore. They buy our fresh chestnuts. It's really cool. So we've replaced that market, and that's the way we're looking at it.
Thanks for checking on that detail. I didn't realize the wholesale price that you're getting was quite that high. So
Yeah.
that's really promising, especially considering you have an optimistic view on growth in that market.
I do.
I want to bring it to Brett. We've let you think about your response for some time now. So I hope you're ready. So you spoke a little bit earlier on, and now I know you're trying to wrap your head around how to get several million pounds in the future to market, and probably within a tight like growth curve, tight timeline. So when your orchards come into production, 1,600 acres. So can you refresh us on how you're conceptually thinking about the several market segments that you mentioned? And before we kind of unpack some assumptions in those, maybe you could speak to the role that you're viewing exports having.
For sure. So upfront, as far as exports go, like I said earlier, I've been told by participants in other industries that it's absolutely critical for setting a base load of demand so that as your production ramps domestically, you're going to have lots and fits and starts as far as selling your product into the domestic market as you build that. And so you need to have that off ramp into international markets. The good thing is that for the US being a roughly 17 million pound market today, the international landscape is much larger. Global trade in chestnuts is around 245 million pounds annually. The US really does not export much into the international market. So if we can develop markets beyond the small amount that we're sending to Canada and Mexico every year, that'll really help us as we try and expand the domestic market. So the export markets are something that we're actively working on trying to develop.
Have you learned anything about the realities there? Is it feasible? Which ports would you go through? What does the price point look like? Does it completely change the assumptions you have around your orchards enterprise sheets?
Yeah, good question. So the conversations that we've had so far, we're lucky that as a part of our investment fund, one of the largest global grain traders plugs into our fund, and they're a partner for us. And they've told us that they would supply us with a barge and buy all of our chestnuts at $2 a pound. And then they would ship them down the river and export them out of the Gulf. And they can leverage international relationships that they already have in place. U.S. export prices over the past 5 years in shell around $2.80 a pound. So I think this partner of ours is doing the math and saying, if we can get them from you for $2 a pound, leverage our internal cost structure, get them to the Gulf and get them out, we can make a nice spread if we can get that $2.80 a pound. But at $2 a pound, that's not the most exciting price to us, but we can still break even at that price.
It plays a role in the economic model, right? It isn't the economic model, but it's like a stable foundation to secure some revenue for a large supply. So maybe that's a good lead into the domestic markets you're thinking about.
Yeah, spot on. It's that base load of demand that we all need, especially when you're investor backed like we are. They want to know that there's some type of off ramp where they're not going to lose their shirt. As far as, go ahead.
Even before domestic markets, maybe closing the circle to how this is sort of a lesson learned from the pistachio market and the figure that was put up earlier showing, acreage increasing over like a 25 year period from 50,000, 70,000 acres up to 400,000, which without much volatility in price. There was fluctuations, but the market didn't, bottom out, right? So can you comment on some of the leadership in the pistachio industries?
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I can give a very quick story as a highlight where early on in my tenure at Agroforestry Partners, I was able to speak with one of the ex-executives of the wonderful company, right? Wonderful Pistachios. And I was just lauding him for the job that he did on building the wonderful brand and how the pistachio industry was really able to benefit from that as it grew over time. And he was like, Brett, he's like, we wouldn't have been successful at all without the export markets. He's like, we did a great job with the wonderful brand, but he's like, we were successful because we built export markets over time to sop up a lot of that growth in production. And then we could take the delta and get it into the US market and really develop a brand. And they did a great job at that. But he was like, he's like, it's the export markets. You absolutely have to have them. So we're keen on developing them. And then, simultaneous to that, we think about the domestic market at a very high level, bifurcating between direct to consumer, D2C, and then business to business, B2B. Given our size, 1,600 acres, millions of pounds, given our investor base and the fact that we need to deliver a certain return to them, D2C just doesn't make sense for us. So we'll focus entirely on B2B. And honestly, that's a good thing because it'll keep those positive price dynamics in D2C in place, hopefully longer than anticipated. And we'll focus on B2B, and that'll help grow the entire market, hopefully. Within B2B, we're focused on three main areas. Number one is selling fresh product into retail grocery on the produce floor. Number two would be standing up branded products on shelf. So think those like vacuum sealed bags, Galil, Blanchard and Blanchard, those kinds of brands. And then number three would be chestnut flour into consumer products and food service products. And there's huge opportunity in all three of those. My holy grail is to someday see a holiday chestnut muffin at Starbucks. It will happen, but it's going to be way down the road. And we know that near term, we have to focus on retail grocery produce section and shelf stable products. In retail grocery, our math suggests that by just going to the centralized nut buyer at the Krogers and the Walmarts of the world, if you could nationalize fresh chestnuts in the produce section at every retail banner in the country, it would be 20 million pounds a year of demand. Obviously, you're not going to get that full saturation, but the point is, retail grocery produce section, that could be up to 20 million pounds annually. When you think about retail products on the shelf, so either filling those vacuum sealed brands like Galil, Geffen, there's an opportunity to do that. Most of them are produced in China today. We could create private label products similar to those for, the Walmarts and the Krogers of the world. That business alone would be tens of millions of pounds potentially. And then once you get into chestnut flour and all the applications there, retail and food service, again, you're talking about tens of millions of pounds. So the opportunity can add up quickly. We as an industry just have to obviously go out and execute, which is a lot harder than you can say. So that's what we're working on actively. We're trying to have those conversations. We're leveraging relationships in the industry to get us in the door with those customers. And then we know that we need to line up testing, processing, production, and distribution over time.
Do you have perspective on, you talked about the market size for the peeled and packaged. Do you have perspective on how that price point or margin shifts from, the simpler fresh market?
Yes. Some of the early quotes that we're getting from potential partners in the middle of the supply chain, like potential processors that could do this work for us at scale, it's not a ton sexier than $2 to $3 a pound. But again, when you're talking in terms of millions of pounds, we're not expecting the $4.50 or the $5.50 a pound price. So at $2 to $3 a pound, we can make a margin, the processor can make a margin, and the retailer can make a margin.
It's not as good as $9 a pound on the internet, but if you're thinking about the commodity prices of other tree nuts in the U.S., it's certainly competitive, and your business is not just made on one of these things. You know, it's a portfolio and you end up with an average price point at the farm gate. So that's interesting. Can you speak a little bit more on a partnership with food processors? I know you commented on the vacuum sealed and packaging, but are you also working on flour? And I mean, you even lose more of your product, right? Because you're losing all the water content, but are you still seeing that as penciling out? I think some folks yesterday talked about why isn't flour the big thing? It's gluten free. You know, there'd be a huge health demand. One of the speakers said because it would be, you know, $20 a pound. So do you see flour as viability in this wholesale market?
We do. We see flour as an opportunity. We know it'll be further down the road. First, we have to get, you know, fresh whole product in front of people, get consumer awareness going. But, you know, you think about chestnut flour and its functionality, the gluten-free aspect of it, it seems to perform well in baked goods. So I think there's a big opportunity in bread, cakes, pastas, things like that. You would mix it in at about a 10, 20, 30% inclusion rate into these products. So even though the price point for chestnut flour is going to be high, you can leverage that across more products just given its inclusion rate. So I think the math can work, but the early conversations that we're having with people are let's crawl before we walk, let's walk before we run, and that'll be a case of trying to get fresh whole product out into the marketplace before these flour-based products.
Yeah, it's early days. So how many years out are you guys from your first commercial harvest?
I mean, we're targeting 2030 for our first commercial harvest, but we know that'll come sooner than expected.
Are you going to be a buyer at some degree in the interim to help prime things?
Absolutely. It's the only way to make the technical aspect of this work, right? Because otherwise, in order to develop products and gain customer demand, we'd have to buy all that equipment ahead of time, do the testing, deliver the product, and ultimately you may not have the customer come through on buying the product. So we'll leverage production in other parts of the world. We'll stand those products up, deliver them into the customer base, and then when our production comes online, we'll look to hand off.
Thanks, Brett. You served the rapid fire portion of the panel. So that's a tentative question. You could choose to pass if you want. It wasn't on the script. But if you, Roger or Bailey, have any thoughts or maybe suggestions to folks considering aggregation, I think we can close on that, and then we'll go to questions.
Well, the basis of what we're doing in Michigan with Chestnut Growers Inc. and the co-op, the idea was that many of the smaller growers have to do all these things like wash their chestnuts, clean their chestnuts, size their chestnuts, float their chestnuts, and grade their chestnuts, and then, you know, and make the sales. Whereas as a co-op, we're able to do all those things that an individual grower would do. So several of our growers would like handing their chestnuts over to the co-op and let me do the selling, so to speak, and that relieves them a little bit. And my viewpoint is that it's going to take a while to get to the economies of scale to do the things that Brett is talking about. And I don't believe it's 5 years or 4 years from now that we're going to be at that mark. But yeah, eventually what he's talking about is the future. And I think it's more like 2040. But right now I'm just excited I have growers. Oh, the other thing is I didn't tell you is that you can't join CGI until you have production. And the requirement is only 100 pounds. But typically I have growers in Michigan that have trees in the ground, and when they're ready to bring their chestnuts to market, they'll be joining CGI, and we're ready to handle that production. And that right off the top of my head, I know of at least 10 growers, and we help them when they put their trees in the ground and help them along the way before they get to production. So that's kind of the advantage of the co-op and what we're doing in Michigan.
In the pecan industry, there's a diverse way that you can handle your crop and aggregate your crop. And, you know, some people sell to handlers and then the handlers do the selling for them and exporting for them. But I think right now, if I were to give any advice to, you know, especially smaller growers, is that direct to consumer market right now is probably the most profitable. And I say that if you're able to, you know, get your crop shelled and you know, pack it and sell it that way, you're going to get about $12 to $14 a pound for it. Whereas when you know, wholesale it or sell it to a handler, it's going to be closer to what Brett's talking about $2.10 right now is what it's bringing, you know, and you can make something off that right now. You can't go much lower than that and make a profit. Or you definitely need to be breaking even with the way that inputs are, especially in the Eastern United States in pecan production. But I think when you go and you look at what you need to do with your crop, you need to look at, you know, what's the size of your farm, what's the scale that you have, how long you're going to continue that, and what the future plans are. You know, do you eventually want to do value added products and things like that? And if you do, I think, you know, if you can go direct to consumer, that's the best way. But I definitely think, you know, if you're farming hundreds of acres of pecans, it's probably maybe easier for you to sell to a handler to export your product in shell and make the money that way as well. It just depends on your scale.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. I appreciate all the contributions. I think this gives everybody considering chestnuts and then knowing how many acres and trees are going on the ground a pretty full context of where we're at as an industry. So thanks again. We want to open it up for questions.
This is for Brett. Do you, can you share the sort of level of investment you're talking about, like in dollars?
For our farms specifically, or just what we expect across the industry? Sure. I don't want to give away too many specifics, but like generally to establish an acre of chestnuts for the first 2 years, right? Buy the trees, plant them, and then maintain them for the first year. I think you're looking anywhere between $1,500 an acre to $4,500 an acre. I know that's a really wide range, but as far as establishing a chestnut acre in a concentrated fashion, you're anywhere between $1,500 to $4,500 an acre. Is that kind of what you're looking for? Oh, sorry. So our our investment fund mainly raises money from wealthy families, so family offices, impact funds that are embedded inside investment banks, high net worth individuals, et cetera. Okay. So far, we've raised around $5 to $10 million to convert those 1,600 acres, and we're going to continue to fundraise to do more alley cropping. That chestnut acreage is alley cropped right now, and then we're also looking at doing silvopasture projects as well.
Yeah, this is something in your opening remarks. You talked about the secondary flavors being a secondary goal. And when talking about strategies for developing this market, it made me think about things like apples or beer or tomatoes, things that where there's volume, there's things that are all taste uniformly the same. But you get into, say the delicious apple was always a disappointment to me when I taste some heirloom varieties. Not all. Well, yeah, that's marketing terminology, and that's a good apple, but how about variety in the nuts, in the nut flavors? Are we going to be, in the development of this, is the diversity of flavor going to be lost? Are we going to be recapturing heirloom flavors that were like wines? Is soil and genetics and climate going to mean there's a diversity in flavors in these nut crops that people are working on?
I'm scared to answer in front of Greg. So you could ask him afterwards and he'll have a better answer because he's got careers worth of experience tasting different cultivars and understanding what they could actually offer from a flavor, a palate perspective. From the breeding program standpoint and trying to systematically go through huge generations, I can't taste every nut, all staff can't taste every nut. And Greg's giving me a hard time for this because we might cull some things out. So I'll just say there's always exceptions to the rule, but we need to look at requisite horticultural traits. If something doesn't have the horticultural trait that we would want in the production cultivar, then we don't need to taste the nuts. We definitely need to look at nut quality in everything that has, and hopefully that's still thousands of offspring, has those requisite horticultural traits. And I think that some of our scientists here, Nick Meyer and Brian Weber, are going to start to look at this from a metabolic standpoint with Dr. Chung Ho Lin. I know some of his PhD students are in here, and they have a lot of analytical equipment to facilitate that. We're actually
Well, part of my bringing this up is in terms of marketing strategy. So we have direct to consumer models via the internet, via market. Those places will be those pockets of retention of flavor, and the aggregates that throw everything in the bin will drive the big growth in consumption.
Yeah, I think the market pull for fresh nuts, because it's such a novelty to produce that in the US, is so strong that maybe that's a secondary thing. Like when there's more saturation down the road, maybe that would be a helpful marketing aspect. I know SI has done some work with the University of Illinois Food Quality Labs and looking at different cultivars from a flower perspective. So maybe this has even more relevance to some of the value-added products, but probably not right now. Yeah. Thanks again, everybody. I want to now move on to panel 4.